I believe I've explained about the API key, which is more like the key to every door, but there is much more than that, which you need to know. We talked more about the barrier token yesterday, where I believe that we some of this, like what we have here. This is the barrier token. We used it yesterday to build something, right? The other one is the OAuth 2.0, where we have it's just using it to click and connect automatically to your service. And there's a basic auth which requires just like a password, and just based on what it says here, this is just basic. It's not as strong as what we have here, which is the OAuth. So this is the oldest pattern, and yes, used by legacy systems and internal APIs, but based on how I see it, it's not as strong as what this is. This is used now by modern softwares and SaaS and systems basically. So what we have here today is the day 30, which is the key to every door. I'm going to explain the 4 authentication patterns that you can configure in make.com, and how to also save all this so you can reuse them every single time. To connect the dots, day 27 and 28, I showed authentication in practice where we built some things together. They were fun projects as well. And I also showed you that Notion's 3 headers. To just show you around all this is, let's bring all this. So these are the headers. This is how to add in an header, and this is how to work around an authentication basically, using an API key, using a basic auth, the OAuth. And today my plan is to break every single one of them down and show you how they look like, show you what they look like, so when you interact with them, you know how exactly you are meant to approach each of them. So yesterday I made use of the API key, which I also used the barrier tokens as well. So most of what we do today is just focus on the OAuth and also the basic authentication. But to give a basic review on that, an API key that we use here, we took from Notion, but there are other API key samples that we could have used. An example is from Airtable, which could have even probably been better than using Notion. And the custom header for this is different. If you remember what I explained to you about custom headers, there are 3 ways where you can approach these custom headers, which is you can use this. Some are like this. Most of the ones you see now, this is the common one. This is what you see now, authorization and the key. This is where you had the bearer token and you had the entire key there. And this one is used. This one is used mainly by, not often used unless, I think if, so this one is used, this one is commonly used. This one is older. You can see it's used by the older version of Airtable as well. So most of these, like this query parameter, is used mostly by Google Maps and some public APIs out there. So we're going to work around this, but to just make you understand how this works most of the time. In the HTTP module on make.com, you guys will have already been familiar with this. This was what we used. Now, the thing I explained is, when it comes to connections which require no authentication, an example is this. We don't need any authentication to actually work around this because it's open. It requires no authentication to have access to this. But there are other platforms, which the example, Airtable, Notion, and various other platforms which require access. Like the examples I've been given when it comes to Notion, is saying the fact that I do have this account, and for you to have access to this account or to this page, you might either have to my password, my username, and every single one, and you need to, or probably I might have to share this with you before you're able to have access to it in the first place. So this is just basically explaining how to connect to this. Now if you want to connect to this account, if you want to connect to my account or my database, which I've also been using all this while to explain, you might have to access the database right here. Okay, so let's just look for the database. That is a lead tracker here. So when it comes to having access to this, we have to either input it here, and to add it here, we need to do something like this. We need to do something like adding authorization There's authorization, and then we have the value. And the value has to be the key, and also I believe I showed everyone the key the previous day. Let's duplicate this and have this head back to developer connection. Alright, so I believe I showed everyone the key, so I'm not taking this off yet. And this is the key. Okay, nope, that's not the key. And this is the key. This value is the key. But before we're able to connect, the mistake we made the other day was not adding the bearer there. So this is the prefix we have to add every single time for it to actually connect to it, because there are several types that you can find out there. You can have the bearer, you can have the bearer, you can have the token, you can have what, or API key. So the bearer is how you can connect using Notion. So if you want to know more about each platform and how or which prefix to use for them, you have to just search online. Just search online and you get to know which prefix. An example is you just, which prefix do I use to connect to my API key on Notion. So, and it gives you the prefix, which is going to mention the bearer prefix. So the same thing applies to, let's use HubSpot, for example. So on HubSpot, this is actually private, but you also use what, the bearer as well. So you can see this, there are various other services which require, they use as prefix as well. So you need that. So this is a way you can actually add the authentication, and you need to add the version as well, Notion version, and you add the latest version of API keys on Notion. But in this case, rather than having to manually do this every single time, it's best if you just add this here, save it, so you can always call on it every single time you need it. So you can call on this now, like this, for example. I already saved the key, so I could just call on any of the key I saved. I saved one, I saved Xiaomi, and I saved Xiaomi 2, right? So when you save it there, you don't need to add anything here. You could just add probably the version for the API key right here. So this is just, explaining how the API key is and how to work around that. Now when it comes to this same thing, but when it comes to the query parameter, how you work around this is a bit different. And the only difference is that you're not using this header, we are using this query parameter instead. So you are using this instead, and you can see we can have our API key and the value. So the same thing, we are going to have a name for it, and we're going to have the value. So that is just that is for the API keys. Now the bearer tokens is the most common modern authentication pattern that we use now, and the token that goes in the authorization header. What I'm literally saying is that it is just explaining what we have here. The same thing for either header or query parameter, which is what we have saved here in the first place. Now one thing you need to know and keep in mind is that you don't just leave this like this. You can switch between in the header or in the query parameter. What this is, once again, is just keeping your value, and anytime you call on it, you don't need to add this here, but it replaces it every single time. It just replaces it without you having to see when it replaces it. So what I have here now, if I choose this, because I already connected it, and I connected it using the header and authorization, which is the parameter name, I can just save this, and it's going to replace it anytime I need to call on this particular module, right? So when it comes to the other one, and you need to work on it as well, you need to change it to query parameter, and you work on this. Now when it comes to the parameter names, if you notice, we have various parameter names as well. Same thing as we have various prefix for each service. We have various parameter names. There's authorization, there's XAPI key, and there's API key, which is what I explained to you over here. This is it. This is the header parameter. This or this or this. So all these are just simple. You just need to understand, you just need to know which one works, which one is used in which service. And like I said, it's something you can just search easily online here, and you have access to anything. So when it comes to the bearer token, that is just what you having to add the bearer and the token value. Now this is a bit different because this time around, though we did take from this token, right? When it comes to API key, these API keys, you should notice that there are some things that are not being saved, or we're not seeing it as an API key. An example of what I mean here is this. When we checked AI Studio, we will notice that, okay, so what we have here, you see, these are the API keys that I use for my Gemini AI back in the days. So what you see here are keys, right? It's more or less the same. So when you say you have a token or an API key, the one on Notion, for example, now is we are seeing it as a token, right? A token just basically replaces your API key in this case. It's more like it's just having a long string of letters. It's more or less the same. However, you can see, however, you need to understand that this is different from a webhook, because what an API key does is to pull, right? And an API key pulls in data, while a webhook, it gets pushed. That is it. That is how this works. So they work more like, I can say, based on how I've noticed it and what I've seen, it's almost like walking in the reverse. And I believe this is something I've explained yesterday in the previous video. So that is just, a basic explanation around that. So it's nothing big, it's nothing actually, difficult to understand. So a bearer token works all more the same like how an API key does. Like I said, in this case, you should understand that a bearer token on Notion serves as our own API key, and that is what we use most of the time. And that is why we're able to take that token and use it when we're supposed to use API key. What I mean is this. I used this, and what I took was what? My token rather, and I replaced it where you're actually supposed to have something like an API key. So it works more or less the same way. And the next thing now, that is explaining the bearer token, is also a bit different for several platforms. So you could see this here. This here says what? Though we still say it's a bearer token, right? Or we still say it's a bearer token, right? So you can see here that what? Despite that, we still have your OpenAI key. So, like I said, they work more or less the same way, and they have similar ways where we can impute them. And these are services where we even get to use bearer tokens as well. In Stripe, in Notion, in Airtable, in OpenAI, in HubSpot as well. So in Make.com's HTTP module, it's more or less the same thing that I'm also going to do as what I explained in the API keys. So not to bore us on that, that's just like more of a recap of what we did in the previous classes, or what we did in the previous days. So the next one which we have here is our OAuth. Now this is where things actually get interesting. When we see this, excuse me, that's not what I'm supposed to pick. So this is our OAuth. This is used by modern applications, and what you do is you create a connection, and it asks you for a couple of things. Now, one of the things that I believe we didn't do much about that, you can have this URI. In most cases, I have interacted more with client ID and client secrets. On some peculiar modules, you might need this instead of just a token. Now, the way this works is that these are things that have been automatically done for us in all these platforms. An example is, now when it comes to what we saw here, what we noticed here, I'm going to give you a very brief example now. What you saw here on this OAuth 2.0, right? What you saw here, every single thing that you see here has been built into platforms like this, into platforms like Google Forms. It has been built into this, it has been built into Google Sheets. And what you do and how you notice that is that when you try to make a connection on these platforms, you notice that all you needed to do was just what? To sign in with Google. It's been built in with it that what? You can just automatically authenticate it directly with your account on Google. So it asks for a connection right after you click on sign in. I don't know if you can see this that is popping up. I don't believe you can see it, but it is going to request me to sign in. It's showing authorization, and I can pick whichever email that is connected to or that I want to connect it to. Now, in another case, this is going to cancel connection now. In another case, I have also seen cases where I could not just sign in directly. So in this case now, yeah, I didn't do that, thank you. So in this case now, when you see this, not everything was used in this case. So this client ID is probably missing. So you need to go to probably your developer console or anything, bring it in. An example of where I've done this as well is also on a Google product, but it was in Google Drive. So on Google Drive, before you can make your connection, you need to create a connection as well, right? Then restricted, then you need to use your client ID, because it's not going to sign you in directly. It would not sign you in directly. The same thing worked for, I believe, one of our Gmail, is it email? I believe that should be the email module, right? So you need to take the client ID. And one thing I probably have not mentioned is that I believe I should have mentioned it. Whenever you want to make a connection and you are clueless on how to work around it, all you need to do is just you see this online app. Make.com have made all this available for us, because there is an help page where you can read how to actually make connections with different apps. So if you have no idea how to work around Google Drive, you could just click on that. You could click on this. It's also the same for this. I'm pretty sure they have for this as well. Every single module on make.com has online help. What is online help shows you is a detailed page where you have every single steps that you can use to connect it. This is just a very detailed step. So when you notice that a lot of AI automation specialists out there, and you see them as experts, what they're actually doing is most of us have read through all these pages, made a lot of mistakes. We faced a lot of cases where we needed to check this. So all this does is just you being someone that knows how to read. I mean, everyone that is doing this knows how to read, right? So I mean, that is just it. You need to calm down and read through every single one of it, and you follow each step. So I remember when I had to connect on Google Cloud Platform, or like now that I know every single step on how to go cloud console, rather. So I could just my God, what the fuck did I pick? Cloud. This was what I actually wanted to type. So you could just go to console, Google Cloud, and it's going to direct you there. You can see it's open. So I'm able to easily go in now, but that's after multiple tries and trying to connect multiple times, and I'm making a lot of mistakes. So you need to get familiar with like this. If you ever hit any phase where you can't make a connection, it's very easy, and it's even probably better than watching a YouTube tutorial. Honestly, being very honest right now. So anyway, that is the way around OAuth. So you might have to connect to the service, use a redirect, add a bunch of links that work exactly with. Yes, I think I added the scopes as well. Here are the various services that you need to actually do this on make.com, like the Drive, not just make.com, everywhere else, like the Drive, the Gmail. This is basically what I said, and the offline access for any service that works that way. So when it comes to things like this, you need to know that there are platforms like this that until you want to use it, that's when you're going to discover that you need to use OAuth. So it's not that you have a choice in the first place. You can't use you can't use an API key directly and just sign into platforms like that. You need to pass through this same step. So in this case, you need to get your client ID and all. But that is even still better because they've been able to work around a couple of things. When it comes to now using HTTPS for this particular thing, to solve this particular problem, instead you need to do more than just You need to do more than just get a client ID and client secret. You need a bunch of other things. So that is everything I included here, and yeah, it is I believe it's as simple as that. So when it comes to the scopes, what access is being requested, there are various scopes. These are shown here are cases where you can also be required to use this method. But what I'm actually showing you here and what I added here is not even just talking about the services. It's talking about the scopes that you need to include whenever you are trying to connect this kind of service. Let me just go directly to my console. So what I have here, if you see my console here, I do have, that is me signing into, that's me signing into Google Cloud. Okay. Alright, so what we get to see here is that I would have said I should start from beginning, but I mean, we're not trying to sign in any case. But this is how it looks like. You need to make available a couple of scopes and make some connections. It's very detailed, and this is a case where I will also tell you, just go ahead and check the online help and just check directions around that, because that is a whole different thing entirely. But if you do need a detailed video on this, probably I can make an example. I would do something about that, or maybe I should write that down and make a video on that. Okay, so anyway, so we do have these scopes. These scopes are things that you select when it comes to you giving access to the client's ID and client secret. Like you are giving them the same way that we do have Notion this way, where you can get the key, right? You set it up and you have the key. You still have to give it access to specific things. You need to give it access to specific services or specific products under the same service. So it's like what we have here, which we give it access to these pages and these databases. So it's also similar. This is also similar to what this. So like I said, you can request for the video like that. If I see this request and it's not, if I see anyone make a request like this, there's no problem. I'll just make a video on that. So in make.com, we have our native modules, right? And all these things undo OAuth entirely for us, where we just click on connect and we can easily do most of these things, including even this. I mean, this is one of the tool that just requires client ID and client secrets. But most of all these other ones, just you put in your key and connect easily. I mean, life is good, right? Yeah. But for non-native services where we have to use HTTP modules, the only variant that we have that works in a similar way is auth 2.0 request, where we have to configure what you've seen there: authorization URL, the token URL, the client ID, client secret, and scopes. The scopes, you see them right inside whenever you start working across all this. So when it comes to, let me just quickly show you how to actually work around our scopes. So we can assume I've set up this particular project. We call it project on Google console. We call it project. So you can see I have a couple of projects here, right? Just a few. I think I do have more than this, but Google already removed most of my projects. Anyway, we could see them here. Let's click on the OAuth consent screen. Here we see a bunch of things. This is where we actually get our client ID and our client secrets. So clients, and we have to create clients. This is me just showing you quickly how this looks like. Just click on that button, create client. That's after you set up your scopes and every other thing too. Then you pick one which application type. That means where do you want to have access to these things, and it's web application because we are doing it online on our browsers, right? If you need this to be on your phone, your Android or your iOS, you have to specify which. So in this case, when you specify it, they will just give it a random name, anything that you can remember, and you give it the URL to the redirect of the JavaScript origin, and you create, and it's going to give you your client ID and client secrets. As simple as that. So to give it access to these features that we've been mentioning, which are the scopes, what we call the scopes now, is just this. Go to data access, and you should have this add or remove scopes. Now in this case, since we're using, this is Google Cloud, obviously we're trying to access Google products, right? the scopes we will get, various scopes, we can get anything just under Google services, right? So we can look for Drive. If you look for Drive, you see the scopes for Drive. You see the scopes for Drive, okay? That is let's see. Okay, so I believe this is something we need to work on by, hold on, this is something we actually need to work on by doing this first. Probably we did not make a connection to that. So library and API services, you have to go there first. You go to API, library and services, then you use, let's assume I want to make a connection to maps, right? I click on maps and it gives me the various connections to maps. I believe the most recent one is as something like a 2.0 or something. It's like a place, my god. I think they've made updates on all this though, because it wasn't like this before. And I'm supposed to have, okay, I will just let me just put place. My god, that was very incorrect. Place. So my Google place, this is the new one. Yes, this is the new one, next generation. So if you want to have access to the scopes for this in your account, you can just come here. This is the new one, this is the old one. This one just have access to, I think, probably 100 million, while this has access to 2 million. When you enable this, you'll be able to use the scopes that is peculiar to our Place API. Place API is basically your maps API. So we have that enabling now. I don't know why it's taking this slow though. Things are not actually this slow on the mouse. So we have added that product. Well, we've added that product. Then we could also search for, let this load. And when we added that, you can see that it's just giving us more shit. Wow, okay, I believe Google made an update on this entire thing because everything looks a bit different. Yeah, so they all look a bit different. So API and services, all this is doing is not necessary. So we've added that to it. Now if you want to add, you can see we have manage reporting instead. If you want to add that, or that's Drive, you click on Drive, or you type Drive, and you can see this here. So it's Google Drive API. This is the one for your Google Drive API. Yeah, this is the exact one. So when we use this and enable this as well, we'll have this load. Okay. So yeah, we're able to call this API from your own. You might need to create credentials, obviously. So that's where we have to create credentials and everything. So what we need now is to go here. Let us have access to the scopes. Let's see what's up. So let's see if we can have data access once again. And now we go to add or remove scopes. And let's see once again now, Drive. So now you see that you have some things called Drive here. You see, initially we didn't, but we have to enable them first. And you can pick the scopes that you want to make available. An example, you want this to see, create, delete all your Google Drive files. And it can do anything basically. Yes, that can come in. This is docs, but you know your Google Doc is connected to your drive. Anything you make on Google Doc is saved on your drive immediately, so it's more or less the same. So this and this, yes, you need this. Once you have this in place, I doubt you need any other thing, because all these are saying read only, metadata. What you really need mostly is to be able to see, edit, create, or delete, whichever one you actually need. Or you can be specific on which exact one you need. If you add this that says read only, you'll only be able to read. And these are specific to those files that were created or edited by Google Meet. So but when you come here, this is to all files that you have. So you need to know what exactly you're actually looking for. And then you update. I think we chose for maps as well, right? For maps. Or let me see, places. So let's see. Try not to have this in. So once we have this, you could cancel this. Then let's see, place. Let's see again, map. Okay, I'm gonna have to manually go through all this. And to manually go through all this, you have to just go through this. BigQuery. A lot of people use BigQuery. There was a time they were very annoying on BigQuery. Companies of all sizes use BigQuery. Anyway, at this point, so yeah, I mean, you understand what I mean by scopes now. That was why I wanted to do that. I spent a couple of minutes explaining to you on them. And I believe when it comes to this now, I don't have to make a separate video now, because that's just the main thing you need to work around. So you have credentials. Yeah, they're just a bunch of things. These credentials is where I can have access to the key I already created. As I create the key in the first place, I already taught you, I already explained to you how to create it in the first place. So you can still get access to whatever key you've created here on credentials. So yeah, that is basically just around working on it. The first thing, remember, you create a project. You have a new project, click on it, and the next thing is you have access to something where you can start what. Once you create this, for example, it's asking for my billing account, so I'm leaving here now. Anyway, so let's go back here. I'm not setting that up. I already explained to you how you can get your client ID and client secrets, and I've not shown you how that looks like, but the way you can just connect that is having that once you create that there, you just have to add that to whichever place this is here. Add that here and you are signed in. So that is what for the OAuth 2.0. It's nothing crazy, just the same way you have somewhere you have to put in some keys, as simple as that. So that is for that. So when it comes to basic authentication, which is the last one, now this one, let's cancel this one is what I've been saying I think multiple times now, where I mentioned that to have my WordPress blog connected to it at one point, because I didn't want to pay for the premium WordPress account where I have to pay, I think that was monthly payments. But if I still wanted to upload my blogs, I could still do it. I could still work around it in a way where I could use my username and my password, until I discovered that was like a lot of stress, so I didn't bother doing that anymore. However, if you want to do the same thing, it just works in this same basic format. But the format we have here is authorization and basic, and we have this and username and password. That is the format you type it. A clear example is saying what we literally just saw here. This is it. The name, which is obviously what you're giving it, then the username and this. So what we see here is these are the things we just want to add into it. So it's as simple as that. I'm just trying to let you guys understand the different types of ways where you can make these connections possible and how they look like. So for the example I have been given, which is WordPress, you notice that it's admin. I mean, this is how admin and my password, right? So the combined, this is how it looks like, and the 64. All these are needed whenever you want to use this. What's it called? This header. Oh my God, what did I do? Whenever you want to use this header, this is where this is what you need to add into it. Then I believe you have to add authorization, and you have to add basic this time around. What I mean is you have to add authorization. This time it is compulsory for you to add this here, and then you add this, for example. Then you add this. So that is what you do after adding the keychain, which is your name and the username and the password. As simple as that. So yeah, that is everything I explained here. So non-standard pattern that you need to know when it comes to some other platforms outside there is this. When it comes to Anthropic, it's different a bit from Vera. It's different from Vera because this one just requires you to just connect like this. Using this format is how you have to actually connect. Then the XAPI key. So this one you don't have to have your key, like it's not this point where you need to have something like Vera. Okay. No, this is totally wrong. So there are some platforms or there are some services that they have a different pattern to how they make their own work. So unlike what we have here, this also that you see here is part as bearer as the access token. I've used this just once, I believe just once or twice or three times when I needed to have access to my GitHub and build a very simple automation right at the back. So this is like, having something to run for you on like a server separately. I just have to create that, and I needed to even request for AI, to put me through all those things. So I added this to it as well. And Notion, which shows you in a different way, it is what bearer and your integration token. So you can see it here. So when it comes to connections like this, you can see the things that you might be asked for. An example is this is what different. This requires what sk dash ant dash your key, and this requires just what authorization and the bearer and your person access token. While what Notion requires what this token, the bearer, the authorization, and also the version as well. So you can see that this is what we've used before, but this is the only thing that's different from this, and it has version history as well. While this one doesn't need anything regarding version, you can just what connect so far you have the token. So this for whichever service you want to connect to, I will just say it once again, you just need to research, check online, what works in which service, and it's going to be very plain online. All this knowledge actually online is something you could access anytime you need it. So when it comes to configuring authentication in make.com HTTP module, this is how the static bearer token looks like. You have something like this. This is what we've done also in the past, and this is what we've done already multiple times, right? So you have something like this, and let's have this, and here let's put this, and what's it called? You pick a post. That is the post. We pick the post, then we had the header, that's the authorization and whatever key it is. And you could also save this key in whichever key. You can save it if you are using what an API key method. You could just save that in. When it comes to API key in custom headers, you know how that works as well. You just have something saved here, which is an example is still this. You can have this as X. I believe I have that there already, but let me just start X API key, and you're going to put the key inside. It's as simple as that. So the other one is the query string, and this time around, remember, we are not using this header. We are using these query parameters instead, and we are also going to do the same thing, where you need to put just API key and your key right inside. So it's as simple as this. And the OAuth, which I already explained, you need to get your scopes and the client ID, client security, your token URL, also from docs. You are going to get that. All these URLs and all this and this, they are already existing in your whichever service you are targeting. So if you are looking into Notion, well, in this case you don't need that for Notion. If you are looking into Google Drive, so you'll be able to have access to all of these things. These are things that have been built in place already. They've been added into this. For example, they've been added there. All these authorization URL, token URL, and scopes. Well, scopes is not added there. You have to do it at the back end yourself. So when it comes to this, even this, I believe authorization URL, you have to also still do it at the back end. That was where I showed you. That was where you saw a redirect URL there, right? These are These are just things you have to set in place based on what service it is. But when it comes to the client ID and secret, that's what you create by yourself. So credential storage, so you never have to always do this by yourself. That is why I always I would say if it's a service that you use often, what I mean there is just you having to add this somewhere, just save this somewhere, add this, and so you always get to use it rather than having to manually add this. You add the authorization, then you have to add the key every single time. No, you could just save it there. It's better, it's faster, and I believe it is safer there as well. So don't add this in your HTTP module headers. Because it's visible in the scenario configuration. Whenever you do this and you run it, it's going to be visible in your inputs. It's going to be visible somewhere here. But if you don't want it to be visible, that is where you have it saved here. What I mean, I'm going to do this in real time, and I believe I could just go here, I pick Xiaomi. So if I didn't want to go through all this in the first place, if I didn't want to go through all this, let's see, keychain is still picking what something. So if I didn't want to go through all this, I could just directly ask my headers. I will post every single thing on my header. And but one thing you need to know is that it's going to give you that response. It's going to show you everything here. It's going to show you here, and that is a bit dangerous. You can see the here. You can see the response is giving us. So it's going to be very dangerous if you have to do this on something that is very sensitive. So that was why I just explained around this. This is exactly me just giving you the options you can use to add the credentials rather than saving it or rather than using it manually here. There are various options of ways you can add that inside. An example is this. Now the first option is for you to go to the native modules, which you can just go to like Notion here and do your connection normally rather than having to go to HTTP, right? What's the use? It is Notion. But the other way you can do it is a data store. So you have to create a data store, which is an example is what we already did here, which we created a data store and we saved every single thing here. That's an example of how it looks like. So, and there's another way you could do that rather than having this is an example of a data store, but not exactly a data store. You could also have a data store created right outside. This is what I mean. You could have data store, right? You can have data store here and saved on make.com. So you could you could use this. What this data store is doing, I say that this is actually peculiar to make.com, and it has its own way of doing this. And you have to save it right outside. Let me see if we do have it here. It's been long since I used a data store, so I can't quite remember if you create a data store now, for example, we had a module create a data store. Yes, you need to create a data structure which will be saved for you to also use anytime you need that. So if you remember what we have here, you can add the name, add the description, enter the value of whatever it is, and if it is more than one, you can add more than one, obviously. And this is what you'll be able to use anytime you want to call on something. But you need to use your data store, and you need to be able to take this. You not use this add or replace a record. You use another data store. That's data store. Get a record. So you use get a record or search record. Get a record in most cases. When you retrieve that, you'll be able to use it to whatever connection you are trying to make. You'll be able to add this right with it. This is add or replace. This is the wrong one I'm going to use. But in many cases, let's assume what we needed was this was get a record. You connect this here, and it's going to be taking that every single time before it does whatever it's supposed to do or whatever it wants to do. So each time you'll be able to access the key. If you guys don't understand why I explained, what I mean is this. Since we've been able to create a data store and been able to add every single thing in a data structure, so whatever we need, we just we have to go add a new module, then data store. Then this data store will look for get a record. We'll be able to specify which exact record that we want to get. And I believe we have to first search the record. Data store. We have to first search for the record, and it's telling us to still create a data store. That's because we don't have existing data stores. So if we do have, we'll just be able to connect the same way we used to do to our webhooks. Where this webhook, we could just what we've had there before. This is a webhook. Let me use this for example. Now what we have here, we could just connect to existing ones that we've been doing before. We connect directly to this, or we connect to this one. So the same thing is what we have here, where you could just connect to whatever you have existing here already. And you're going to have that search for it. Once it gets it, it sends it over to this. This is another way of having everything already set up. That is basically what. The other one is now the custom variables, where you have to set it once every single time when you want to run a scenario. But what this is just trying to say is that every option here is better than you having to manually by yourself say you want to input it and save it here. it is better. It's better than doing that. So when to rotate API keys? API keys are, I wasn't quite familiar with this as well, to be very honest. I found it weird, especially when I probably build products or anything and I decide to upload this on the cell. Whenever I see something come up, I'm like, to rotate, a key, like why do I need to do that? So it is quite necessary to even do that, because if we remember recently, I believe it was the cell that was hacked or something. There was something about that. So it's just for security purpose, and also for when a team member with access leaves. I mean, you need to ensure that that team member doesn't have the current key that you're using for your system or for your products or anything, or you suspect exposure. That means probably your screenshots showing your key shown in a screenshot or a repo commit. You probably saved it in your you probably saved this in your repository or probably in a Slack message. When you see all this, I mean, these situations means that what, it has been exposed, so you need to ensure you just rotate it. You need to change it. So any security incident in adjacent system, if anything comes up in any other system, it's highly likely that there's something wrong, or probably the key you have is already exposed as well. So you need to what? You need to rotate it, and you can rotate it every 30 days in production for production keys. And some services enforce this. Yes, even though when I was putting this together, I actually looked at it and I was like, I'm also guilty of this, because I believe that I don't do this often. So, but I've been actually trying to do it. So I did set an alarm on my phone every single 3 months, to ensure that at least I have something going on. So, or when you are creating a new workflow, you can decide to use a fresh key. Sometimes it's simple. If what I have here is I'm using this, I could just change this and revoke this, or refresh the access token, change it to something else entirely. So it's as simple as that. And a quick authentication decision tree. Now, this is what will make you know if what you want to use require you to use an API or a basic authentication or OAuth 2.0, right? So the question you ask yourself is, does this API require user level permission? That means an example of what this is the Notion. What is the one I have on Notion? That's an example actually. Well, page. That's an example. So does it require OAuth 2.0? When it comes to 2.0 though, it's not like no, it's not. I'm not being very specific here now. What I mean here is that when it comes to OAuth, an example is like the Google Drive, and another example is like the Google. Just most of Google's services requires OAuth, right? So you could use that method to add into it, like the email, like the Gmail or the Google Drive. So now you use OAuth and you now start to decide, do they have a native module on make.com? If yes, just use that, please. Don't start giving yourself unnecessary problem. I mean, you can use this to actually practice, but don't give yourself don't give yourself unnecessary problem by having to build this from scratch in any case. If you have a native module on me.com, well, you could play around with this, but eventually I will tell you to just use the basic one. I mean, they've done a good job already. Why do you have to do more than you should? So if they don't have a native module, you could use HTTP 2.0 request module, and yeah, that is that. Now, if you don't require an API level user level permission, you could just go for the account level key. An example of what I'm saying here is what I've mentioned about some other platforms which requires bearer, like Notion, and another platform like the examples I've just been giving you all this while, which another one, the WordPress I mentioned. This one I basically just break it down. So let me just say that is where you require the bearer or the API key, or you need the basic auth, or you need a query string. These are the cases. So OAuth is on a whole level on like separate. You need to do more. You need to have a client ID, client secrets, token URL, authorization URL. Unlike what you have here on the likes of Notion, the likes of HubSpot and various others, that you just need a bearer token or an API key, or like the example of the WordPress I gave, which is like the basic username and password and a query parameter too in some other platform, in old legacy systems basically. So these are just what, this is how you make a decision on whether you should go with the OAuth or you should go with API keys, bearer keys and the rest. So that is everything I have to just explain today, though I took longer than I should have. I believe I will try to work on that in subsequent classes. So yeah, so I believe I'll try to work on that in subsequent days. So we have today's task, which is just do the same thing we've done, or this for everything we've done, and for each API you've used in layer 3, identify which pattern. So I wanted to look into everything that we've done together. Notion, we've handled Notion. Tally, you could also explore the one on that Google Drive. You could actually explore it. Just I wanted to specify which pattern of authentication we need for this, and the exact name, header names. I believe all these things are already provided up there. Where is the credential currently stored as well? So, and if you were handling this off for a client, how would you secure it? This is something we handled yesterday when it comes to security, and when it comes to also connection as well. So these are things that I believe that if you have answers to this, personally, with what you've noticed, I wanted to give an answer to this. So yeah, all right. Looking forward to seeing you guys in the next class, and it's going to be fun.